Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius, the official energy drink of pewterreport.com. We have a very exciting show for you as we are live from New Jersey, where myself, Matt Matera, and Adam Slavon were at joint training camp practice today between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New York Jets. It was such an eventful day. So many things went on, and we want to say what up to all the Pewter people that are watching us during this evening's show. Like I said, I'm Matt Matera. Joined with me is Adam Slavon of pewterreport.com. Adam, it was a heck of a day today, was it not?
It really was. A ton of action. You saw all the fights breaking out, 6 of them. It was hard to keep count. And then, obviously, there was a big injury, but also a lot of big plays made. There were some guys that really impressed against the Jets, and it was a good sign as they have a tough matchup ahead of them because the Jets in their first preseason game, they won 27-0 against the Panthers, going up against another NFC South team in the Bucs. Be really interesting to see how the Bucs hold their own. But based on practice, they really did, and they had some attitude with that.
Yeah, there was a lot of fire shown by the Buccaneers today. We'll get into all of that. Obviously, a lot of news regarding this man, Lavonte David. And Richard, I agree with you. We should be recording from a bodega. We are recording from one of our hotel rooms at the moment. We'll have a different location for tomorrow's show as well, but we'll talk about more of the housekeeping later. Let's get right into it, Adam, because the news happened very early on. So for those, just to inform everybody, so the way it worked is we got to joint training camp practice. The Jets have multiple fields, just like the Bucs do in Tampa.
Yep.
So for warm-ups, the Jets were completely on their own on one field. The Bucs were completely on their own on another field, and that's where a lot of the viewing, video, photo, all of that stuff took place during the individual. So if you see a lot of photos that we're putting up on the podcast where you're not seeing too much of the Bucs against the Jets specifically, that's because the photo and video was shut off by the PR teams of both teams before we started getting the 7-on-7s, 11-on-11s, and everything else in between. But yeah, we got to start with the big news. Obviously, super unfortunate. You saw it on the graphic. Russell Gage, really, really bad injury, a knee injury, and it looks like he's going to be out for the season. Adam, you were on that side of the field when that play was going on. Can you kind of walk us through what happened?
So it was right at the beginning of team drills when the Jets and Bucs were breaking up and kind of going against each other. What was weird with the Gage play is that it was a non-contact injury. There was a Jets defensive back on the play, but he was kind of a few yards away, and Gage just went down on his own, and right away, you can kind of tell it was bad because players from both teams, they were getting at it all day. They weren't getting at it on that play. They were all on a knee, just kind of being very somber. And then about 5 minutes later, you saw the cart come out, and Gage, he was going out on the cart. He got kind of had his head down, looked like he was in tears, just really unfortunate. And especially because just a week ago, head coach Todd Bowles, he said that right about now would be when Gage is being in every play and kind of stepping up as that third wide receiver in the offense. So just to see him go down right now, it means next man up. And Chris Godwin, he kind of alluded to that in his press conference. Each press conference today kind of talked about Russell Gage and just how heartbreaking it was. But it also means an opportunity for some guys like Trey Palmer, David Moore, another experienced wide receiver, Raheem Jarrett. Now he might make the team as a 6th wide receiver, and obviously Devin Tompkins. So just really unfortunate with Russell Gage, just kind of like a freak play. And it just kind of been the tale of his Bucs tenure because he had the hamstring injury, the concussion in the playoff game, and now we'll see what the diagnosis is, but it's not good.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about what this means for the Bucs wide receiver room. I know we talked about it a little bit. We also have a super chat to get to, but first, we'll get to the video. It's of Todd Bowles talking about Russell Gage at the time before the news came out from Jeremy Fowler that he is going to be out for the season. Just the reports of what Todd Bowles was told about it, and then We spoke to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin as well, and just their reactions to the unfortunate situation for Russell Gage. Because you're right, Adam. I mean, this was last year. It was a little bit of a disappointment for the season that he had. Didn't totally work out, but it seemed like if he was fully healthy, this somewhat new Bucs coaching staff, obviously with Dave Canales as offensive coordinator and Brad Isaac, the wide receivers coach, they're both very excited about Russell Gage, and unfortunately, they're not going to get to use him today. So let's get to this video.
We're here. It's going to be pretty serious, and I'll wait to hear the final results. But he's been battling back for the last, obviously, since he's been here, it seems like. We wish him the best. I can tell by the way he was sitting on the truck that is probably something that happened pretty bad. And our hearts go out to him, and we'll see how it goes.
There's no silver lining. Yeah, man, my heart goes out to Russ. Like that's my dog, and and like you say, he's been battling some things since he's been here. So to see him go down again, is very, very tough. I'll be praying for him. I'm gonna check in on him when I get here. So I don't know how serious it is, but hopefully it's not too bad. You hate to see it with anybody, especially someone like that you're close with. Like you said, there's opportunity now for other guys to kind of step in, and we got a great group of young guys that have been working their asses off all camp. Now it's trying to see who's going to step up and to be able to fill a big void there. But like you said, I think there's a lot of guys that have the opportunity to and have the ability to. So we'll just see how that plays out.
One of those, how much this impacts the team, what he means.
Was so unfortunate. He was just getting back into game-ready shape. He was looking good. Made a nice catch, and like his knee buckled a little bit. We don't know the severity of the injury. We've been praying for him the rest of practice. I just pray that it's not as bad as it looks.
Yeah, understandably, a tough situation to talk about, especially for Mike and Chris being in that room with Russell Gage and, going through so many practices and battles with him. So we definitely send our best to Russell Gage, and hopefully he can recover from this and continue his career. Because as we've seen with the Bucs, knee injuries have, especially with Ryan Jensen, have been a huge issue. But at some point, obviously, the Bucs have to focus on what's next for the wide receiver room. And Adam, you were talking about it a little bit before. Someone in that room has to step up, whether it's Devin Tompkins, who has been doing things during training camp, made some plays today, wasn't maybe the focal story.
Yeah.
Trey Palmer was a stud again. We'll talk about him in just a moment. This kind of opens the door for Raheem Jarrett or even Cade Warner or, David Moore has a likely shot at the team. But we do have this super chat from Trustin Vorbeck. Thank you so much, Trustin, for this $4.99 super chat. Trustin asks, you may have spoke about this. Any chance we go grab a free agent wide receiver, T.Y. Hilton or Sammy Watkins, because of the Gage news? We appreciate it, Trustin. Thanks again for that super chat. The problem is we're getting closer and closer to the the season. So especially at wide receiver, you're not always going to see guys like that, be available, kind of star players. I saw someone mention, so we got two laptops going. That's why I'm looking like this a lot. Saw someone mention Jarvis Landry. Now that is a guy that's intriguing. Out of everyone else, T.Y. Hilton was a mention as well. T.Y. Hilton's kind of up there in age, as Trustin mentioned.
Sammy Watkins gets injured a lot.
But Jarvis Landry, you have that connection. If Baker wins the job, there is that connection between Baker and Jarvis Landry. And although things didn't necessarily work out with Baker and the Browns, Jarvis Landry was a beneficiary of Baker.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, when Baker was on the Browns, Landry was the top target, with Odell Beckham either being injured or just not really productive. Had a lot of success and kind of the same profile as Russell Gage, somebody that could benefit being in the slot, maybe not especially getting being a deep threat and 15, 20 yards down the field, but just being like a slot guy, really good on slants and kind of in routes. He'd be really intriguing, and he's still young enough to have upside within the Bucs offense. So interesting if they go that route, but I don't really see them going after a veteran wide receiver just based on the talent that they have and a lot of in-house options. Raheem Jarrett, he looks like an under-the-radar steal. Baker Mayfield himself said that earlier this offseason. And then you have other guys like Devin Tompkins. He could really break out in his second year. But we'd be remiss if we wouldn't talk about Trey Palmer. And he stood out the most of all the receivers today. Now, he had that nice touchdown catch in the first preseason game against the Steelers. he connected this time with Kyle Trask on a 60-yard deep ball, and he kind of got lost in the sauce. Sauce did.
Sauce got lost in his
sauce.
his own sauce. So just want to get to the super chat first before we keep talking about Trey Palmer, because Tusk3, thanks for the $4.99 super chat. Tusk says, what do they do if Evans or Godwin goes down for a game or two? No proven depth, no big body guys either. I'll answer this in the sense of, okay, if you look at the Bengals, if Jamar Chase and T. Higgins go down, or A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, no matter who your top two wide receiver duo is, if you're missing your top two receivers, odds are you're probably screwed in a game, and now especially with Russell Gage. With that said, and this goes hand in hand with Trey Palmer, the Bucs have a lot of unproven talent, but guys that can make a name for themselves with Trey Palmer, who we just talked about. Devin Tompkins, I know, is going into year 2, but Raheem Jarrett is looking like a diamond in the rough. So I understand the no proven depth, but there's a lot of potential on this team. And Trey Palmer, I mean, he said it the other day before we even got to this joint training camp. He was asked specifically about playing against Sauce Gardner and was like, it's just another name and just another face. Doesn't really matter who it is. And on the play specifically, we actually got a great breakdown from Chris Godwin about it. And Godwin said that it was cover 0 because the Jets were sending the house, so there was no safety help on for Sauce Gardner on the play. Bucs did a pretty good job protecting it from what I saw, and it was further down the field. So, but the Bucs put it on their social media, so clearly it was a good enough play. So I would definitely recommend to everybody to check it out. But it was just Trey Palmer beating Sauce Gardner deep.
Yeah.
And I see Richard saying sophomore slump, a sophomore slump.
Ooh,
that's a good one there. I'm not going to say it's a slump. I just think Sauce Gardner got beat on the play. I don't think you necessarily have to look too much into it. But Trey Palmer, he proved it in the first preseason game. He proved it today. He made a nice outside catch as well, Adam, right? You saw that one.
Yep. It was about 15 yards down the field. One of Baker's best throws on the day. And then you just saw Trey Palmer adjust and make the catch. And so with Trey Palmer, he really looks like the full package, and not only having the 4.33 speed to beat a guy like Sauce Gardner, but also having the body control. I mean, you saw it in the Steelers game, that catch, he did the tiptoe. That was really well done. And so far, he really looks like the leading guy to be the number 3 wide receiver. And going from LSU, he played with guys like Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. And now he plays with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So he might just play with the best wide receivers in each league he is a part of.
You are 100% correct. He just surrounds himself with great wide receivers. And the reason why I'm putting this picture of Dave Canales up to kind of answer this further, because someone has to step up, because if something, God forbid, does happen to Mike Evans or Chris Godwin, we saw this play out last season, Adam. It happened against the Green Bay Packers, because let's remember, Chris Godwin got injured in the beginning of the season, and then Mike Evans got suspended against the Saints. So going into Green Bay, Russell Gage, who was playing but injured and clearly limited, if you watch the game, clearly limited, even though he did score a touchdown later in that game, the Bucs were down to slim pickings. And because the offense was different and it was a lot more of, hey, go out and please win your one-on-one matchup, when you're asking wide receivers 4 and 5 to do that, when you had Rashad Perryman and Scotty Miller going out and doing it, it didn't necessarily work. And they didn't even really use Devin Tompkins to the point that they really could have. This season with Dave Canales, the new offense, way more horizontal, way more about getting guys open quickly and focusing on that yards after the catch. This offense clearly is not going to be better if you don't have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. But Adam, if it comes down to a scenario where it's Trey Palmer, David Moore, and Devin Tompkins, I'm not going to say I love it. I'm not even going to say I like it, but I'm okay with it. I think the Bucs can be competitive in a situation like that. Now, they're going to need that quarterback play to elevate, but I think the Bucs could keep the ship from sinking in a scenario where Mike and Chris are coming back at some point and you got to stay afloat for a little bit. That's really all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's a great point. And I don't even think it's out of pocket to say that Palmer, David Moore, and Devin Tompkins are a better trio than Brashad Perriman, Scotty Miller, and Julio Jones based on last season, just because they're younger, they're faster. I mean, that was the method of the Bucs offseason, was getting younger and faster on both sides of the ball. So really see them as an upgrade, and then just also having the upside too, because Julio Jones, he spent most of the season injured.
Don't want to see Julio Jones.
Yeah, he's still a free agent, but don't see him coming back. And then Brashad Perriman, kind of a journeyman wide receiver, and Scotty Miller, got to like what he did in 2020, Bucs fans, against the Packers, making that nice catch over Kevin King. I remember that vividly.
Yeah.
But at this point, just not too much. But you have a guy like Trey Palmer, just really exciting. And if Evans and Godwin go down, God forbid, as you mentioned, Trey Palmer, he's really exciting, and he could be next in line. But you take any top two receivers away from a football team, obviously they're going to get worse.
And last thing about Trey Palmer, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin both said today, Mike Evans specifically said, this was Trey Palmer's best practice that he's ever had. This is the best that Trey Palmer has done. So what does that say? He's getting better and better and better. And he is riding that momentum of a great game, a good game against the Steelers. I'm not going to say great just yet, but a really good game against the Steelers. He's been riding that momentum because his last couple practices in Tampa were pretty damn good. And then he did what he did today against one of the best corners in the league. So the arrow is trending upwards for Trey Palmer in a time where they're really going to need him, because wide receiver 3 is still very important to the Buccaneers. We got another super chat. Thank you so much, Bucs Basement, for the $5 super chat. You're always chipping in for pewterreport.com, and appreciate everyone with the super chat so far. Remember, if you super chat us, we will make sure we answer your question. You get to cut the line. We can't answer everyone's question. We appreciate everybody watching, but super chats get first priority. Bucs Basement says, I'm all for just going with what we have. Bucs are paying off the credit card this year, compete next year with a new head coach and hopefully a top quarterback pick. Bucs Basement, I appreciate the super chat. Respectfully, I'm going to disagree with that last part about a new head coach and a top quarterback.
Next year. I see him competing this year.
Exactly. I see him going over 6.5 wins.
Yeah.
Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I know you were talking with Stephen Che about that.
I was.
And the 6.5 wins. You got to go the over. Even if they go 7 wins, it's very likely they get 7 wins this year, because I think we've embedded this point home. There's too much talent on both sides of the football, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But just having so many dynamic playmakers on offense with Evans and Godwin, the new scheme with Dave Canales will have so much more life in it than anything with Byron Leftwich and his red pen. But just seeing that and knowing on defense what you have with so many guys, I think there's 9 starters that have made a Pro Bowl.
Yeah.
Something pretty close. So just seeing that, definitely got to say they're going to be competing this year in the NFC South. And it's a division. I mean, you saw it with the Jets and the Panthers game. The Panthers didn't look that great going up against all the Jets backups. And so it'll be really interesting to see again what the Bucs can do against the Jets in this preseason game coming up.
No question about it. I think that NFC South is very wide open. I think there's going to be a huge learning curve, especially for Bryce Young with the Carolina Panthers. I'm not totally sold on the Falcons and their quarterback situation. Carr is probably the best quarterback in the division. But, Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask very much in it as well. Adam, the other biggest storyline that came out of practice today, because, again, so much was going on. If anyone is a fan of like boxing or the UFC, they try to, especially the UFC, they try to like stack these pay-per-views with fight after fight after fight, some good cards. That is exactly what we saw at training camp today, because there were at least 5 or 6 scuffles, dust-ups, skirmishes, whatever you want to call it. There were a fair amount, and we're not going to go through every single one. But the most surprising thing was that in 2 of them, Lavonte David, yes, I'm saying that correctly. Lavonte David, the inside linebacker for the Bucs, the longest tenured player for the Bucs, a team captain and a future Ring of Honor member, not only got into 2 fights, but the second one that he had, he was absolutely enraged.
Yeah.
He was incensed. I had never seen Lavonte David be like that in a training camp or even a game before. And I even went up to Rick Stroud, who was at practice as well. And I said, Rick, I know you've been covering the team a little bit longer than me, but I've never seen Lavonte be like that. And Rick essentially agreed with with what I had to say. Rick was saying that he's usually the guy that's pulling people away. The first one, he got into a little altercation with an offensive tackle for the Jets, who was also wearing number 54. That was Billy Turner. And Lavonte made a tackle for a loss. And then the pushing and shoving happened. You can actually see it in our article on pewterreport.com, the Bucs Camp Insider. A couple other Bucs got involved, including Jamel Dean. But the second one was so surprising because Lavonte had his helmet off.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he wasn't even in on the play. He had his helmet off, and he was having a lot of words with a cornerback of the Jets.
I think it was Brandon Eccles.
Yeah, Brandon Eccles. And Lavonte, helmet off, goes charging at Brandon Eccles, screaming at him, pushing. Everyone then got involved because obviously Bucs players, especially on defense, are going to be like, oh, if Lavonte David's in, I'm going in as well. And it was Ryan Neal, who actually has been a peacemaker a lot. Ryan Neal was the one that pushed Devin White and Rashad White away a couple of practices ago when they were jawing at each other. It was Ryan Neal, and I think Will Golston was in the mix too, pushing him away. But Adam, what'd you think about seeing a completely different side of Lavonte David that we're not typically used to seeing?
I just want to say, with the Bucs coming up to New Jersey, they really brought that heat in the practice.
They did.
And Lavonte David, he was in the center of it. And just seeing Lavonte David like that, it was really surprising and just wanting to get in on the action. Now, if you were an MLB fan and you watched maybe 2 weeks ago, Jose Ramirez and Tim Anderson going at it, Brandon Eccles and Lavonte David was almost a reenactment because they were shuffling on the sides, ready to throw up fists. And Lavonte David, he might have done his best Jose Ramirez impression if he wasn't held back. But just seeing that and seeing how charismatic and fired up he was has to be encouraging for the Bucs, and just seeing how much fight that some of these players have, and especially Lavonte, a guy who's been through some dark times and then obviously reached a pinnacle in 2020 with the Super Bowl, just still wanting to keep that culture and that hunger alive, I think is going to be really vital for the Bucs this year. And you obviously with the talent, that's a big point, and seeing some guys leave in the offseason, but the culture is almost just as vital, if not more vital, to success in a football team, because you need those guys that are leaders in the huddle and they can really motivate and encourage.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think sometimes fights can kind of bond teams in a sense. Like Mike Evans is talking about it, and we have the video, we'll play it soon, but you can almost see in Mike's face, he was kind of enjoying it.
Yeah.
Todd Bowles did not enjoy it. He wasn't a big fan of that. So Lavonte was in the middle of 2 fights. There was a fight during special teams early on. Couldn't exactly tell who the players are because the pushing and shoving happened right away. We're only allowed to be at a certain point of the field. And then, 1,000 players jump in and you see a lot of different stuff. Josh Hayes, the rookie from Kansas State, on one play, it was him and a Jets receiver. The Jets receiver's jersey was like really bunched up, so I wasn't sure if it was 88 or 85, and I didn't want to falsely accuse a player of getting in an altercation when it may not have been them. But it was Josh Hayes and a Jets receiver. They legitimately had like a wrestling match of who could bring the other one to the ground, and then, pushing and shoving, hitting the face. Josh Hayes' helmet got ripped off. Like, that's how aggressive it got. There was another one in the mix where like Anthony Nelson had made a tackle. Nelson wasn't necessarily the one doing the pushing and shoving, but again, pile-ups, everyone going. There's going to be great content for Hard Knocks next week, just with those fights alone. And then one of the last ones that we saw as well was your guy, Luke Gedeke, against Jermaine Johnson, who is in his second year. He played at Florida State, balled out at that Senior Bowl last year, which was incredible. He's been a really good pass rusher for the Jets, especially this year in preseason already. Gedeke went after.
Yeah.
Went after him. He almost like put him in a headlock in the moment. So good to see a little more emotion from Luke Gedeke. But I mean, man, Adam, it seemed like every single play, it was like they better blow that whistle because the fight is going to get worse and worse.
And just to mention a couple other plays, Cody Mauk, he laid down Solomon Thomas on a rep and absolutely pancaked him. And you mentioned Josh Hayes. There was another Bucs defensive back, Carlton Davis.
Heard of him.
Yeah, you might have. He threw down Garrett Wilson on a play. Aaron Rodgers threw a pass to Garrett Wilson's way, and Carlton Davis just said, "Hey, you're going to the ground, man." And so that was really interesting to see. And Lavonte David, I spoke to him briefly after practice. When I asked him about the defense, he just said it was pretty solid. You know, guys were locked in.
Yeah.
Just throwing people to the ground, pancaking, you know, it's all part of it. And so just seeing the offense and the defense get in on that and display that fire was really nice to see, and kind of a change of pace for both teams, and going up against some different guys, having different looks and different schemes. And it's really going to benefit the Bucs.
Yeah, and the Jets had a joint training camp practice last week as well against the Carolina Panthers. So had another one today with against the Bucs. Maybe it's good that these teams only had one practice because it could get even worse tomorrow. Let's get to Todd Bowles and Mike Evans both discussing the fighting that went on.
Of scuffles out there today. You mentioned it before. Did you feel like the intensity level was higher from the beginning just because you're playing against someone else, or did it kind of ramp up throughout practice because of what went on?
It ramps up. I mean, it ramps up and it continues in special teams, and it kind of gets overheated. We really don't want that in the game. We don't teach it. I know Robert doesn't teach it as well, so try to keep them to a minimum. At the end of the day, everybody's just trying to push people around. One doesn't want to get punched and one doesn't want to throw a punch. So it's kind of that way, but overall, I thought it was good work.
Were you surprised to see it from Lavonte? Because he was getting into the mix, and he's the leader.
And these joint practices, everybody gets into the mix, but you don't want it in the game.
I don't know if it's because we're going to practice against them one day or what, but this is the most I've ever seen in a joint practice, and I had a lot of joint practices in my career. This is the most fights I've seen, but they were quick. They were all like settled. After everybody's cool now, so it's all right.
Seeing all these battles and scuffles at training camp, it kind of fired me up too. It very much made me feel energized, which of course reminds me of the official energy drink of PewterReport.com, Celsius energy drinks. Great to pick some up in New Jersey as well. You can find a Celsius energy drink no matter where you are, whether you're in Tampa, whether you're in Florham Park, New Jersey, whether you're in East Rutherford, where we'll be tomorrow for Bucs practice. We'll talk more about that later. But if you need to find a Celsius, where to get one, go to the store locator on the Celsius website, punch in your address, and it'll tell you the closest geographical location where you can find one at your local convenience store, maybe a supermarket, 7-Eleven, Walmart, Target, or your bodega. All right. We're working on it. We're working on it. We're going to try to get to a bodega at some point on this trip and pick up some more Celsius. But, of course, no sugar, no post-energy drink crash or Jersey. You got another product out there. It's absolutely fantastic. So many different flavors. The new one is the Cosmic Vibe, which is a sparkling fruit punch. Can't go wrong with the sparkling lemon lime or the sparkling orange, the Arctic Vibe, the Fantasy Vibe. So many awesome different flavors. I had an Arctic Vibe this morning. Strawberry kiwi guava, strawberry lemonade, cucumber lime's another big one. So a ton of awesome flavors. Watermelon too. A ton of great flavors. If you want to get the variety pack, it's Variety's Spice of Life. Maybe get that kiwi or that pomegranate. Go to Amazon, do the subscribe and save, and you can have it sent to your residence every week, month, quarterly, yearly, whenever you want it. Just make sure you're drinking Celsius energy drinks. Make Celsius your number one pick with PewterReport.com. Adam, let's talk a little bit about the offense. You were watching them at least at the beginning of practice. I was lucky enough to see the Trey Palmer play later on. But we got to talk about Kyle Trask and Baker Mayfield. What was your overall thoughts about how they did in today's practice?
Yeah, so besides the big play to Trey Palmer, the Bucs quarterbacks today were mostly quiet. Not a lot of big plays. Overall, I would say solid. Kyle Trask obviously had the connection to Palmer. On another play, he rolled out of the pocket, escaped 2 Jets defenders, did a really nice throw on the run about 30 yards down the field, but it fell incomplete. Otherwise, Baker Mayfield, he really just kind of threw passes up the middle for about 8 to 10 yards or so, just kind of moving the chains. John Wolford, biggest play out of him was actually an interception. A Jets defensive back, he picked it off, took it to the house. So on the offensive side of the ball, not a lot of big plays. Later on, there was also Rachaad White. He had a run up the middle. Robert Hainsey and Cody Mauch kind of cleared a path for him. So that was really interesting to see, especially in his own blocking scheme. They're really going to need to do that this year. It might be Hainsey in week 1 now that Jensen's status, it's looking unclear and question marks are kind of arising every day. Didn't really see him out there at all today.
No, not even
not dressed. He just wasn't there. So really concerning with that. But otherwise for the offense, kind of a quiet day, I would say.
Yeah, it seemed pretty, I think pedestrian would be the right word.
That's a good word.
I mean, you have the big play to Trey Palmer, but really outside of that, there wasn't too many of the splash plays, the excitement. I think Baker was able to move the ball pretty well in the 2-minute drill towards the end of practice. So that was a good sign for Baker. It was obviously an even better sign that neither Baker or Kyle Trask were turning over the football, which is, obviously been a big topic of discussion for Tampa Bay. And I think Trask clearly had like the top, the top highlight play of the day. So, and he got to work with the ones, which I think is very important to point out as well. And he'll get the start against the Jets. So I'm not saying that this quarterback competition is done just yet.
Yeah, not yet. And speaking of Trask, one other play I want to mention, there was a play he almost got picked off. CJ Mosley, the linebacker, he made a play on the ball, almost intercepted it. It deflected off of his hands. And you talk about having a good wide receiver. Mike Evans, he caught the deflection and made the play on the ball. So that kind of speaks to, even if the quarterbacks aren't making the most accurate throws, the wide receivers can still make a play on the ball. But like you mentioned, with the second preseason game upcoming, the competition ain't over. And it ain't over till it's over. So it'll be really interesting to see how the quarterbacks play upcoming this weekend. And maybe by the 3rd week of preseason, a starter will be named.
Yeah, I mean, they got to come up with a decision sooner rather than later. And I almost think it's much, much better for the Bucs if, Todd Bowles can kind of come to a decision before that last preseason game, unless it's that close and down to the wire that you have to see these guys play one more time, or maybe play with the starters in a legit game. But I just think it's better to give one of the guys the reps and just let them keep going for that first game against Minnesota. I did want to talk about the run game a little bit. I know we just talked about it. You mentioned the Rachaad White, the 15-yard run set up by Robert Hainsey and Cody Mauch. Mauch has really been coming on the past couple of days, and including that game against the Steelers on Friday. We should note that Robert Hainsey left towards the end of practice with a trainer. He was walking off to another field. Now, we didn't notice any limp. We didn't notice really anything that would make us think like, oh no, he's going to be injured for a while. It is something that we will have to monitor for tomorrow's practice when that is going on. But I thought it was very interesting today. Again, we spoke with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, and there was an emphasis in some of their answers about how much better the run game has got recently. Is that something that you've picked up on, Adam? Because it seems that the run game, although it had its struggles on Friday, is starting to pick things up just a little bit more.
I would say just a little bit more. And Rachaad White, he said after practice that we are placing like an emphasis, and our identity is going to be on the run game this season. And I thought that was a really interesting quote, because even if they struggle, they're still going to stick with the run more so than last year when they were just kind of checking it off the play sheet. And I feel like against the Steelers in the first preseason game, there were some nice run plays by Chase Edmonds. He had a couple solid runs, and then another one by Sean Tucker that would have been a touchdown if it wasn't called back. So you can kind of see that the bright spots are there and they need to happen more frequently. But based on like the scheme and seeing some signs of life, it does seem like the Bucs running game is heading in a positive direction.
I think they're going to be running a lot towards that left side with Matt Filer and
you don't know about the right side yet. It's still very unproven. But
I don't know how many like passing plays you're focusing on the offensive line, but pass blocking has been a little bit of an issue for the O-line, and obviously the Jets have one of the better pass rushing defensive lines in the league. How do you think that O-line kind of held up against the Jets?
I actually thought it held up pretty well, and I'm not just saying that because based on last week, it didn't do so hot, especially Luke Gedeke coming under fire from Bucs fans. But Luke Gedeke, he didn't really have those plays letting the Jets pass rushers get into the backfield. It was more so the Jets offensive line letting some Bucs defensive pass rushers get in on the action. I think Rich Cimini from ESPN, he said there was 10 Bucs or 10 dropbacks by the Jets, and the Bucs got to the backfield 6 times. On the Bucs offensive side of the ball, you didn't really see that. And that speaks volumes because you have guys like Quinnen Williams, Carl Lawson, John Franklin Myers, Jermaine Johnson. There's probably 7 or 8 guys on the Jets defensive line that could be starters. And seeing Cody Mauch pancake Solomon Thomas, seeing Luke Gedeke get into it with Johnson, really encouraging. And they didn't get beat much, if at all, today.
That's definitely a great sign for the Bucs offensive line. I'm not going to put all my stock into that, but I'm at least, going to give it a quick shout out. Let's talk about the defensive line because they were bringing it. They were absolutely bringing it today against the Jets offensive line.
Yeah.
They got to Aaron Rodgers multiple times, starting with, and this was a great one to see, Shaq Barrett. So like we said before, we were talking to other Bucs media that was there today, chatting with Stephen Che a little bit from Barstool Sports, shout out the Yak. And I was telling Stephen, because obviously we're there every day, and Stephen's based out of New York, he's moving to Chicago. I was saying, like, Shaq Barrett has looked as quick as he ever has. I was telling him about that first practice of training camp where he was moving and cutting and all over the place. And it was great to see Shaq. He had 2 sacks today. One came on the left side. There was another where he cut inside. He actually made a move to the inside. And poor Aaron Rodgers, man.
Yeah.
Rodgers had to scramble for his life all over the place. But Shaq had 2 sacks. Anthony Nelson had a sack as well. But that wasn't even the story with Anthony Nelson, because the big moment for him was actually dropping back in coverage. Now, Zach Wilson was in at quarterback at the time, and it was a bit of an odd play. You could see it on social media, either in our article for the Bucs Camp Insider. Got to give a shout out to this Twitter account, Let's Talk Jets. I guess they were in the crowd and they can film, so they had a lot of the videos from today. But, obviously Anthony Nelson was in zone. He was covering a certain area, dropping back. And one receiver started out on the left side, but then kind of went further down the field. And Zach Wilson either thought he was going in that way or he was supposed to go to the flat and he ran the wrong route. But Zach Wilson just threw it into complete no man's land, where only Anthony Nelson was the guy there. So was it the most difficult or stellar interception of all time or pick six? No, it wasn't. But part of dropping an outside linebacker back into coverage is the element of surprise. Oh, this guy doesn't usually cover. What is he doing? And when the ball comes your way, you have to make the play. That's what you got to do. And Anthony Nelson did his job. Todd Bowles called him Steady Eddie after practice. That's why they run these drills. Okay. That's why you see Shaq moving and going in coverage. That's why you see it with, Anthony Nelson and JTS and some of these guys. So kudos to Anthony Nelson. Seems like every single day he's making a different play.
Yeah, and so you mentioned Shaq Barrett and Anthony Nelson. JTS, Joe Tryon-Shenka, had a Jets reporter ask me, who's number 9? That was Joe Tryon-Shenka today. He had a sack up against Aaron Rodgers, and a couple other times he forced him out of the pocket, got pressure. And that's a big thing for JTS heading into this year, is turning those pressures into sacks and really converting them into sacks, because the past 2 seasons he's kind of stalled out at 4 sacks. So if he can double that or better, especially with Shaq Barrett, I mean, going up against the Jets offensive line, they're not necessarily good up front with the starters, and they were playing the backups. So kind of got to take it with a grain of salt. But seeing Shaq Barrett, he's probably not at 100% yet, but if he's at 50 or 60%, he's making plays, and he was definitely making plays today. So just seeing the Bucs edge rushers really get to the quarterback was a nice sign. Again, have to see if that translates to games, but it's there and it's building.
We saw another play from Logan Hall as well, who's featured in this picture next to Kalijah Cansey. And quick update on Kalijah Cansey. He's still out of the boot, which is good. Not practicing yet, but he's out there every single day, which is nice to see. Servatier Dennis, did not participate either. Yaya Diaby and Christian Isian practiced with the position drills, but didn't do any team drills. No 11 on 11s, and obviously no Ryan Jensen either. But Logan Hall, another play, getting into the backfield, getting in the face of the quarterback, had a quote-unquote would-be sack. So that's a couple days in a row where you're seeing Logan Hall pop up.
And he was quiet for the first few weeks.
Hey, that's what I was going to say. In all honesty, the first couple of days of training camp, first couple of weeks, really, we haven't seen a thing from him. And maybe that's because Kalijah Cansey was kind of
stealing the show,
being the star of it. But Logan Hall has really come on. Now, we have to take this with a grain of salt, because the Jets did not have a lot of their starters in.
Yeah.
Not by choice. They're dealing with some injuries already.
Mekhi Becton, I think he's coming back. He's always injured.
Yeah, Mekhi Becton actually was practicing for a little bit, but they moved him around all over the place. Elijah Barrett-Tucker did not participate. Dwayne Brown is still injured. He actually showed up today, so Jets fans were pretty excited about that. Laken Tomlinson as well did not practice.
Was, at left guard.
Yeah, he was
center.
Exactly. So Joe Tippmann, one of their rookies, one of the best hairdos in the league's got that mullet going. He had been practicing at center, but yeah, they moved him to guard today. So we were talking about a rookie going up against Vita Vea. Not even just a rookie that had been focusing on one position and moving to another position. So it was a little bit of a makeshift offensive line for the Jets. So consider that when it comes to all of the, all the great plays made by the Bucs defensive line. But also, I think it's a welcoming sign, specifically for Logan Hall, specifically for Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, that at least in the battles of guys that are fringe starters versus backups, at least for the Bucs, I know JTS is starting, they're at least better than the backups. So they're somewhere in between, or have been making more plays than the backups. So there's at least that somewhere in between of going against nobodies, because I don't think that's the case. There are some talent on the offensive line with the Jets, but also you're not getting the best of the best. So I think that's definitely a welcoming sign for the Bucs overall defensive line. Let's get to the cornerbacks as well. We're going to talk about them in a moment, but also got to talk about the best realtors in the Tampa Bay area. That is Eric and Caitlin Gross, the Eric Gross Group. They had been living in Cincinnati for a while, but they are huge Bucs fans. Eric's dad grew up in the area, did a lot with the military as well, so shout out to our armed forces. Buying a house is one of the most important things that you can do in your life. It is a major, major decision, and you want to make sure that you get it right the first time. And you can go with any type of realtor, but the key with all of it is that the relationship that you have with this realtor. Are they putting in the effort? Are they going the extra mile? The cool thing about the Eric Gross Realty Group is, they're a family company. They have young kids. A lot of people looking for homes, they're starting their families, or they have hopes of starting their families. So one of the most important things to the Eric Gross Group is just getting to know their clients, being on the same level of understanding with them for what they're really looking for, what you want out of your dream home. So just a great guy. We had him on the show. He knows his Bucs football. So if you want to chat the Bucs with him, he's happy to chat about that all day. So many people are moving to the Tampa Bay area now. So go with someone that you know that you can trust with Eric and Caitlin Gross. If you need to find out more information, go to www.housesinflorida.com. One more time, that is www.housesinflorida.com. You won't go wrong with Eric and Caitlin Gross. Make sure you check them out. The official realty company of pewterreport.com. All right, so it's a very interesting day, Adam, with the corners, because in 7-on-7s, early on, it was not the best start.
Yeah.
Right out of the gate, 7-on-7s, Aaron Rodgers hits Garrett Wilson deep.
Garrett Wilson was cooking.
Garrett Wilson may have been the best player on the field today.
Yeah.
And especially out of the skill position players. And that's not a knock on the Bucs or anything like that. But Garrett Wilson was an absolute dog out there today. And Aaron Rodgers even said after practice that the big difference between the Jets practice against the Panthers and the Jets practice against the Bucs was Garrett Wilson.
Yeah.
So that first play, right down the field, Aaron Rodgers to Garrett Wilson, not the most ideal start. Then the next play, Zach Wilson's in, and he hits a Jets wide receiver, Irvin Charles, with Carlton Davis in coverage. Let's remember this. Carlton Davis was in coverage, and Irvin Charles got the better of him deep down the field. A good deep ball from Zach Wilson as well, and Carlton Davis just got beat. But don't you worry about Carlton Davis, because you know he's a gamer. You know that he just wants to annihilate the receiver that he's going up against, because he brought it after that. He had 2 straight pass breakups against Aaron Rodgers with good coverage. One of them was on Allen Lazard. But, you know, this has kind of been the story of Carlton Davis, because 2 pass breakups, if you just looked at that headline, you say, oh, pretty good. Nice job, Carlton Davis. But the second pass breakup, Rodgers is looking to his right. He's trying to get a quick throw in. Davis reads it. He cuts off the route. He jumped it from the beginning. And that's what a lot of these Bucs defensive backs have talked about, just knowing when to anticipate, when you can cheat on a play. And this is one of those moments. And he dropped it. He dropped it. He had it right there and just couldn't come up with it. But not a bad day by the Bucs corners and safeties. Just not a ton of plays.
Yeah, and it's also hard to make plays, I will say, against Aaron Rodgers. Throughout his career, I think he's only thrown 105 interceptions. I mean, he doesn't throw many interceptions, even in a practice setting. And his release, we saw it firsthand. He whips that ball out like nobody's business. And just being able to make the sidearm throws really goes through his progressions well. So it was a great benchmark and maybe measuring stick for the secondary and seeing how they would fare. And you mentioned Carlton Davis having those pass breakups, throwing Garrett Wilson to the ground. Now, Garrett Wilson, Aaron Rodgers said after practice, he might be the next Lavonte Adams. So really a top of the line receiver that they were going up against, but they held their own. At least Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean. There was another play by Derek Pitts, the undrafted rookie. He had a nice pass breakup. Otherwise, maybe Zion McCollum, didn't really see him at all making any plays, which will be huge for him in his second season after kind of struggling in his rookie year. But otherwise, I would say, like you mentioned, a solid day, but didn't really set the world on fire.
No, like Jamel Dean got beat maybe one time, but again, nothing alarming, nothing that you have to worry about too much. Zion didn't get beat, but he didn't make a play either.
Yeah.
Safety-wise, Ryan Neal was involved. Antoine Winfield Jr., happy birthday to him. It is his birthday today. Again, not great, not terrible either. Just kind of
they were kind of there, but
there were some really explosive moments, whether it was the fights, whether, unfortunately, the injury to Russell Gage, whether it was the big play to Trey Palmer. But I felt like those were all kind of mixed into some, again, pedestrian average play. Nothing to be mad or concerned about. No one got beat badly, but nothing to be like, oh, wow, this was truly incredible.
Yeah. There wasn't, I wouldn't really point out a Bucs player today and say they did bad. There's a couple players you can point out that they made plays and they did good. But when you mention the secondary, you mentioned the quarterbacks, a lot of average.
Yeah. Yeah, no question about it. And that was the last of the Bucs and the Jets of the joint training camp practice that they will have. So very interesting what is going to be coming up, because tomorrow the Bucs are practicing, but they're not going to be practicing. They're not flying back to Tampa just to fly back to Jersey and play the game on Saturday. You may know there's another team that plays in the metropolitan area, also in New Jersey, but call themselves New York. And that's the New York Giants. Now, you may be saying, wait, what? They're going to have a joint practice against the Giants and they're playing against the Giants? No. What's going on is tomorrow being Thursday, the Giants have a game on Friday, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So they're not practicing on Thursday. The Giants have been kind enough to lend their practice facility to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers so they can practice. Out of spite to the Jets, a little New York rivalry. They do play against each other this year, the Jets and the Giants. Ooh. So there is a little bit of gamesmanship there. Maybe they'll give some inside notes on what they saw at yesterday's training camp practice. So could be a little bit of gamesmanship there. But it's kind of cool, Adam. Today we are at the Jets facility. Tomorrow we get to check out the Giants facility, compare notes, see which facility had certain things that maybe we like or didn't like. I thought the Jets facility was pretty awesome. It was cool to see it. But a change of scenery for the Bucs tomorrow in East Rutherford, New Jersey, where the Giants have their practice facility. So that very interesting. Bucs had to change a lot of things on the fly. So shout out to their front office, their PR team, because they were able to,
and the operations staff.
Yeah, the operations staff
being able to adjust to all that.
To move all these things around is really, really super cool to see. You have to really be pinpoint with that, be right on top of what you need to do. In other words, you have to be right on the money. And if you want to manage your money in a smart way, if you want to make sure you're getting the most out of your money and your investments and all your plans financially, the best place that can help you out with it is Immuni Financial.
At Muni Financial, we help you live in the now.
Dude, congratulations. We're so happy for you.
Thank you. And even though the now may feel very different, you still need to plan for the future.
How's retirement treating you?
Oh, just fantastic.
I know I say it all the time, but you really got to come up to Colorado.
Let's do it.
All right.
Yeah.
We can help you develop that plan to keep you on track so you can still prepare for tomorrow, today. Muni Financial. Plan ahead, stay ahead.
Immuni Financial, proudly serving clients across the country since 1980. That's right, across the country. So we know we have a lot of Bucs fans, a lot of Pewter people that don't live in the state of Florida. You don't just have to live in Florida if you want to work with Immuni Financial. They're super helpful with so many things, including advisory services, legacy and retirement planning, insurance services, annuities and sales trading. And of course, if you want to set up a college fund, if you have children and you plan on paying for their college using a college fund, they can help you out with that. Just give them a call over at Immuni Financial. You can get a free consultation, no charge at all. Check out what Immuni Financial has to offer, what they can do for you. That's Immuni Financial. Adam, as we wrap things up, is there anything that you want to see for tomorrow's practice specifically? Maybe someone that needs to step it up, someone that you want to see keep it rolling? What are your thoughts?
That's a good question.
Thank
and
you.
If I were to pick any Bucs to maybe say, hey, keep this up, I definitely would say Joe Tryon-Shoyinka and Logan Hall. Just seeing them as young Buck defenders, being able to consistently produce. Now, Logan Hall, he's going to be thrown into a starting role this year. And with Kalijah Kancey still injured, he really needs to keep producing after having such a quiet first few weeks of training camp. And then for Joe Tryon-Shoyinka with, again, Shaq Barrett maybe not being 100% yet. And then also Anthony Nelson, while very solid, maybe has the floor of being just a very good like role player being thrown in there. Joe Tryon-Shenka has all the tools to become a dominant edge rusher. It just can he. And then also maybe other guys that want to see more out of. Definitely Zion McCollum as a third corner. And then also Devin White. Lavonte stealing the spotlight today and getting into fights and just kind of being the leader out there. Devin White didn't really have too much of an impact today. So kind of want to see his name more in the discussion, whether he's in a fight or maybe just making a play. Could see his name in the discussion as well.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you with Devin White. He almost had a moment where he got in a fight with someone today. It was a little more words exchanged.
Yeah.
He had a blitz where he almost got to Aaron Rodgers, and he kind of got tripped up and ended up on the ground, and Aaron Rodgers actually helped him up. So not everyone had bad blood against each other. I think Devin White's a good answer. There's two guys that really popped into my head on the offensive side of the football. One of them being Devin Tompkins. I thought he was okay today. He almost got into it with Sauce Gardner. Sauce just made the tackle and then wouldn't let go of him. So I don't really blame Devin Tompkins for, sticking up for himself. But obviously with Russell Gage and everything that's transpired with him, everyone moves up a spot. But this is a huge opportunity for Devin Tompkins, I think, in particular, given that he's in a battle with Raheem Jarrett and Trey Palmer and some of the guys that we talked about.
David Moore.
Yeah, David Moore. The other position, really the whole room, but I guess specifically if we're going to talk about the starter, Cade Otton and the tight ends, they surprisingly were nowhere to be found. Like absolutely nowhere to be found in today's practice.
I only remember him making a catch.
Exactly. I saw David Wells made a catch in the 2-minute drill, but outside of that, not a thing from Cade Otton. Now, sometimes that's just kind of the way that it goes, So, yeah. And then as far as defensively, I know I said Devin White. I want to see one of the younger safeties do something.
Like
I'm not worried
Isian.
about Ryan Neal. Yeah, Chris Isian, we had something there. By the way, Shaggy says, hit that like button. Please do so. Al Bundy, Isian news. He worked out individually. So, yeah, I want to see one of these safeties step up. Nolan Turner, we've seen it in moments near the red zone. But what about in 11-on-11s when you have the whole field to play with? Kayvon Merriweather. He's a little behind right now.
Yeah.
Josh Hayes got into the fight, but what else did he really do today? He did have one pass breakup. So one of those rookie safeties, I think, is something that I'm really looking for in tomorrow's practice, which will be super fun. And if you liked all the content that we put out today on Twitter, we're going to have more on Instagram, some other stuff on YouTube. Please follow us on our social media. Pretty much everywhere on X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Threads. We are at Pewter Report. And then our YouTube channel is Pewter Report TV. We got tons of content, of course, pewterreport.com. So please follow us on our social media. Please like and subscribe. Hit that thumbs up. We'd really appreciate that. Just a reminder, again, for tomorrow, Bucs will be practicing at the Giants facility. That's going on around 9:15.
Like 9:10.
Yeah, 9:10, 9:15. Same deal. Photo, video for the beginning. Then we'll live tweet the rest of it. We're going to have another podcast tomorrow night at 7 p.m. So same time as tonight, prime time, recapping everything that went on in tomorrow's practice. We'll give you the down low on everything that we saw from it, where the Bucs just practicing against themselves. And then we'll have a podcast Saturday night after the Bucs Jets preseason game. That will include Scott Reynolds as well. But that's going to do it for us on tonight's show. For Adam Slavon, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks everybody for watching, and we will see you tomorrow night for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.
Out.
Join training camp.